Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Winning Edge Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Pat, and today I'm joined alongside me on the other side of the desk, Ben Black, as always. Again, don't have Aiden, but that's all right. He should be back, hopefully, soon. Ben, how are we doing?
It's really good to be here, Pat. And it's another big week of sport. A lot of things to talk about, and
Yes.
we're pretty much now a third of the way through the AFL season, which is pretty crazy to believe. And a lot of action taking place within the world of sport. And it's good to be here. And let's get straight into it.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with you. There's a lot to discuss today and break down, so let's get right into it. So, starting off, how did you see last week of football, round 8?
Yeah, it was a very interesting one. So I definitely saw the first two games as pretty boring, to be quite honest. Yep. We'll probably break them down in a bit further depth, but the Essendon North Melbourne game and the Freo and St Kilda game, you probably couldn't have scripted a worse two games. Like it's probably watchable to watch Essendon and Port Adelaide, but the Essendon and North Melbourne, should I say, sorry, but Fremantle and St Kilda was barely watchable. And then games following, yep. Bulldogs absolutely smashed Port Adelaide, Adelaide Crows smashed the Blues, Collingwood lost to Geelong, West Coast made a bit of a fight against Melbourne, but Melbourne ended up winning by 32 points. Sydney got back up the ladder with their win against Giants in their Battle of the Bridge. Hawthorn had their 100-year celebration, beat Richmond, and Brisbane just had to do what they do against the Gold Coast.
So let's break them down, shall we?
Yeah.
So we started off last Thursday night under the roof at Marvel. As Ben said, you had Essendon taking on North Melbourne. The game ended up finishing quite close, only 3 points the difference. 9-11-65 was Essendon to 9-8-62 to North Melbourne. Quite a close match, but as you did say, it was quite boring, especially in that first half. But in going through it, towards the end and in that second half, North Melbourne really tried to bounce back, and you could really see some very strong glimpses of what this team can do potentially.
Exactly right. And it was one of those things that Essendon had 3 players injured in that second half of the game, which really probably should have opened the door for North Melbourne to really capitalise on this. And obviously they didn't. And but credit to Essendon of getting up. But some of the big... so Harry Sheezel, who has copped his fair... slack over the last week by Kane Corns, racked up 32 disposals, 591 metres gained, 5 tackles, and he definitely showed that what the criticism they received probably, I guess we could probably talk about it. Did you think that Kane Corns' treatment to Harry Sheezel was quite harsh, or what did you think?
It's tough to say. I think the way it all escalated was quite unfair in a way. I mean, the media definitely did ramp up on it all. Kane Corns, obviously, don't think it helped his case. He put out the next day on social media a picture of him in the Essendon change room saying, it was so good to get into the winning team's change rooms at the North Melbourne game.
Yeah.
So I feel like the way it all kind of escalated was not proper, but you always hear someone in the media, like a journalist, going on about, is this player who he should be? Or media people and journalists always target a certain player every now and then, especially a certain team. So I feel like the way it was, it wasn't necessarily expected, but in terms of what he was saying, it kind of makes sense a little bit, because he seems like that type of person where he's there for the disposals. And look, I'm not having a go at Harry Sheezel here. He is a bloody fantastic player, he is. And he proved that the other night. All right, but in a way, I do kind of get what he is saying, because for a young player, the way he is, he should be doing a lot more than he is.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that there's a lot of talk around the fact that North Melbourne, their rebuild is definitely taking slower than teams like Richmond, who have completely got like about 9 players that came in the draft this year, and the fact that North Melbourne still can't manage to win these games, which they brought in the experience of Jack Darling and Luke Parker and everything, and they still can't manage to get these sort of wins when they probably had them on the had them booked in to probably should have won with 3 injured on the bench for the Bombers. But Tristan Cherry played a pretty outstanding game. Was ranked second best on ground according to Fantasy. It was a pretty good battle considering he was versing his mentor in Todd Goldstein, and it's one of those games that you sort of like. Goldie just looked like he just did not want to be there, and obviously he couldn't help it.
Still getting back into the use of things for playing AFL football again.
Exactly right.
But look, like that last half of football at Marvel was one. It was definitely interesting. All right, like Essendon early on in the game got out to a near 30-point lead. North Melbourne kind of brought it back, and then Essendon just went back again up to about 30 points, and then North Melbourne just kept like chipping away at it and bringing down the lead to eventually it being a 3-point game and North Melbourne just losing it. Some could say that, North Melbourne could have won that, especially at the very end. I mean, they had a couple of opportunities, but then they lost it, and I mean, there was also a lot of criticism the next couple of days with the umpiring decision, especially in that last quarter. There was a free kick that was originally handed to North Melbourne that would have ultimately given them the win if he kicked it, but then it was overturned, and they're like, oh, hang on, I got word that it's not a free kick.
Yeah.
And that caused a lot of controversy. But in saying that, Essendon proved to be the better team. But North Melbourne, as I said, they did prove to have a lot of fight, and I don't reckon another win for North Melbourne is that far away. I think they can get one within the next few weeks, especially if they keep playing the way they are. Yeah,
definitely. Moving on to the Friday night game, St Kilda took on Fremantle, which the Ross Lyon Cup, as many people have talked about. It just was a typical Ross Lyon game, very defensive-minded from St Kilda. The first half, I must admit, from looking at first glance, was barely watchable.
Yeah, it really was. I feel like there was only one quarter that was where you could actually watch the football, and that was probably the third quarter. That last quarter, everyone knew what was going to happen. So I know for a fact I didn't watch that last quarter.
Yeah.
That first half, as you said, it was barely watchable. No one wanted to watch a game where a team that was expected to win only had 7 points on the board
at halftime.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those games that you look at it and you want to say that Freo is a good team, and like we'll touch on who they're playing this week. Bit later on the podcast, but the fact that like they were touted as being a top 4 team, and they just can't win away from Optus Stadium. But one player that really stood out for me was Cooper Sharman. Like he took some pretty handy contested marks, kicked 4 goals too, had the 16 disposals, dominated in the aerial clearance, and then you had Mitch Owens showing what he's capable of, but. The sad miss for the Freo Dockers is Hayden Young going down with hamstring injury, so it's not going to help their cause going into this week against Collingwood. But there was a lot of contributors for St Kilda. They dominated 6 of the top 7 most amount of disposals on the game. Jack McRae had a field day, 38 disposals, 8 tackles, 14 clearances. Wanganeen Miller, 28 disposals, and Carl Wilkie dominating in the back line, 24 disposals. So there wasn't really a whole lot of highlights for Freo to really Like when Shea Bolton only has 7 touches of the ball, Jai Amos only has 8 touches of the ball, Sean Darcy only 8, Michael Frederick only 10. It just really shows that the top-end talent of St Kilda really outshined the bottom-end talent for Freo.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, in saying that, I think there's not much we can really talk about this game. It was a very below-average game.
Yeah.
So moving on, we got the Bulldogs, who absolutely annihilated Port Adelaide by 90 points in Ballarat, I should say, in front of how many to Bailey Smith? 5,000.
5,000, yeah.
20 to 11, 131 was the Bulldogs score to 5-11, 41 Port Adelaide. And everyone was saying it was a wind. Everyone was saying it was a different measurements of the ground. But Bulldogs they came out roaring.
Snarly.
Yeah. Literally they did. And, Bontempelli had an amazing game, 23 disposals, 3 goals, 1 clearance, 8 tackles. Like, he was doing everything. Bulldogs were all over them. You had Bailey Dale, 31 disposals. Ed Richards, 30 disposals, 2 goals. Adam Treloar, 27 disposals, 1 goal.
Tim
English, 27 disposals, 3 goals. Like, they were just all over Port Adelaide, and Port Adelaide just had no answer whatsoever.
Yeah, very similar to the Freo St Kilda game. Bulldogs had too much top-end talent at the top, while Port Adelaide had really, they had, what was it, 8 players who was in the bottom 10 of the least amount of disposals in the game, and it just showed that when Finlayson's not really on, when Jackson Mead isn't really on, Willie Rioli, obviously he had his stuff going on, which is fairly topical at the moment. And Mitch Georgiades only hit 1 goal too, so there's not really much to highlight from Port Adelaide. It was just a game that they just did not show up. And you look at the games this year that they've played, they lost to Collingwood by over 10 goals. They've lost to Bulldogs by over 10 goals. And now they've got the showdown this week against Adelaide, which it's a game that they just have to win. They beat Sydney. So it'll be a game to watch this weekend when we talk about the showdown.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get into that very shortly. But, yeah, Port Adelaide just had no answers whatsoever. And Bulldogs had everything going for them that game. They also, I think I saw they also had the 2016 Premiership Cup out on display up there in Ballarat.
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, all 5,000 fans in Ballarat had an amazing showing of the Bulldogs and how strong they could be against a team like Port Adelaide. But yeah, moving on.
Let's talk about this game. Adelaide taking on the Blues. They lost 16-14, 110 to Carlton, 7-8, 50 in a 60-point thrubbing, which is just showing a little bit. It's probably good for me because I'm not a Blues supporter, but it's just showing your inconsistency to perform. You beat the Geelong the week before, but then you go up to Adelaide, which it was told from. I got told a stat yesterday that you've never won at the Adelaide Oval, which
not against Adelaide.
Not against Adelaide. So it's a big stat that sort of needs to be broken. And but if we go through the goal kickers, Jordan Dawson 3 goals, Isaac Rankin 2 goals, Josh Rochelli 2 goals, Alex Neil-Bullen 2 goals, Ben Keys 2 goals, Darcy Fogarty 2 goals. And
then you have Corey Durden and Charlie Curnow and Paddy Cripps that both had 2 goals for Carlton, and they were nearly all of our goal kickers when you think about it.
They kicked 6 out of the 7 goals.
So it was it was a very bad showing by Carlton. But look, again, when I think about it, I don't know why I tipped Carlton. All right.
You probably tipped them because they beat Geelong the week before.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, why I did end up tipping them. But then when you think about it, like, you did have the stat of, like, Carlton's never play well in Adelaide. They never end up playing well against Adelaide.
Yep.
But then also, like, you had a big loss in Silvani, ultimately, who was one of our most consistent defenders this season, I would say. And, yeah, like, it was a terrible showing, especially after a team that performed so well against Geelong the week before.
Yep.
Everyone had all this hype and expectations about Carlton doing that again and possibly having the scoreline opposite and that. But then, yeah, Adelaide just...
Are you worried yet? Or do you think they can still...
No, well, it's still quite early on when you think about it, all right? Like, you look at last season where you had got teams like Brisbane and Hawthorn at this stage, all right? But then also, we're only 2 games out the 8, 1 game out the 8.
Yeah.
There's a lot more games to be played. And you look, there could well and truly be the game tomorrow night at the MCG could go either way between Carlton and St Kilda. They're very evenly matched teams right now.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that. But, yeah, I'm not worried at this stage. If we had dropped a couple more games, like if we dropped the Geelong game, then I'll probably be a lot more worried than I am now. But there's still a lot of the season to go. You have a look 2 years ago when we went on that run, like we were bottom 4 in June. It's only early May.
Exactly.
All right, so there's a lot more football to be played, so we'll just have to wait and see, but Carlton definitely do need to improve.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Moving on to the Saturday night game, Collingwood took on Geelong Cats. Collingwood going down, unfortunately, 12-15, 87 to Geelong 11-12, 90 in an absolute classic 82,000 showing up at the MCG.
But
Jack Crisp showing his absolute touch wood. His streak is literally made like metal. 245 consecutive games, overtaking the great Jim Steins.
That's crazy.
I don't think it will ever be broken again because I don't think there's anyone close to 240 games.
With the way the AFL are handing out suspensions, no one's definitely going to come close to it.
Exactly right. And so if we go through the key performers of this game, Brody Myercheck, 4 goals, 3. Shawnee Manor, 2 goals, 2. Ollie Henry, 2 goals. Ollie Dempsey, 2 goals. And then there was just
Ollie Whitshaw, 1 goal.
Ollie. Bailey Smith, 1 goal. Scott Pendlebury, Shannon Neal, Tim Membry, Denton Houston, Bobby Hill, Jamie Elliott, Paddy Dangerfield, Nick Dacos, Nathan Cox, Jeremy Cameron. So, I think I said to a few of my mates last week, I said every time we've taken on Geelong, Jeremy Cameron has always managed to kick a goal from out of bounds because that's just, every time we play Geelong, like I've been to a few Collingwood Geelong games and it's just, I feel like we're getting cheated. But then I say this game, obviously results didn't go Collingwood's way, but it was a great game nonetheless. And then if we look at the disposals, Bailey Smith definitely showing why he's probably one of the recruits of the year, despite his off-field antics. Josh Dacos, 32, Paddy Dangerfield, 29, Nick Dacos, 28, Scotty Pendlebury, 26, Steele Sidebottom, 25. So it's one of those things that Steele Sidebottom and Scott Pendlebury have racked up, I think, over 100 disposals in these last 2 weeks of alone in football. And you're probably letting two of Collingwood's, two of their probably greatest of all time to rack up that much disposals. It's just crazy, to be honest.
I want to break down this final 2 minutes of play for you.
Yeah.
All right. There were points where it looked like you were going to fight back, and it also looked like there were points where Geelong were just going to run away with it. How did you, in the eyes of a Collingwood fan, how did you see those last 2 minutes of play?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I actually was not watching the game live. I was at a wedding, but I have watched the last...
to you.
Well, I'm not married. I have no ring. Yeah, no ring. But yes, it was a good wedding to be at. um, yes, it was. It was one of those things that, like, as much as we got that close, I'm just surprised that Geelong let us back in to get that
Yep.
close. Like, it really should have probably been a 3-goal loss, but it just shows the character of the Collingwood Football Club in trying to get back in those close games. And
Classic Collingwood fashion.
you're not wrong. And the fact that Jack Crisp had that opportunity to have that match-winning shot after the siren, it just highlighted Collingwood from a tee.
You could not script it any better, I don't think.
No.
I mean, you have the milestone man and the man of the moment, the man of the game in Jack Crisp, who in his 255th consecutive game, 45th consecutive game.
Other than 10 games there.
Well, at this stage, he'll get there.
I'm touching wood. If he gets injured, Pat, I'm blaming you.
We'll come back in 10 weeks' time if he doesn't get it. But the man of the game going to win the game after the siren, you could not script it any better. You had 2 ball ups in the final 15 seconds after Brody Myercheck kicked the goal. All right. And it all went your way. You had a holding the ball, advantage, kicked it straight into the 50. I would love to know whether they were aiming for Crisp at that point. Anyway, going on to the next game.
Yeah, West Coast took on Melbourne. West Coast going down 11-10-76 to Melbourne 16-12 108, going down by 32. West Coast led at half time, surprisingly, which is like a bit crazy in itself.
It was quite close up until probably halfway through
the third quarter.
And then Melbourne just ran away with it.
Exactly right. And Jake Waterman's probably showing why he's probably their West Coast's only forward. Like he's consistently racking up at least 3 goals. Like if you had to put a cheeky bet on, you could almost bet on that Jake Waterman would kick at least 2 goals in a game. But some of the stars showed back up for Melbourne. Max Gawn, 35 disposals, 47 hitouts, 9 clearances. That's just winding back the clock from Max Gawn. And then you got Christian Petrarca, 29 disposals, 8 clearances, and 362 metres gained. So when you got both of them firing, Melbourne look 10 times a better side.
Yeah. And, they just had... And, I mean, there were a lot of controversy. I know I ended up tipping West Coast, and I think at the end, a lot of people may have actually thought, all right, maybe West Coast actually has a chance here. Because Clayton Oliver was out.
Yeah, he was.
They didn't play Clayton Oliver, so maybe then a lot of people thought... And, the way Melbourne ended up playing in that second half, even without Oliver, just proves that Melbourne can be a fighting team.
Exactly right.
As you said, you got the players of Christian Petrarca and Max Gawn, putting up 1 goal, 1.1 behind each, 35 disposals and 29 disposals.
Yeah.
Their midfield is dangerous, but, again, not everyone expected it to go. I mean, people probably thought, all right, Melbourne's just going to run away with it. And, they did, but no one, I don't think, expected West Coast to be so close halfway through that third quarter, especially the way their season's played out.
Exactly right.
Anyway, moving on, we had the Battle of the Bridge, Sydney taking on GWS. Sydney finished with 12-15-87 to 10-13-73 at GWS.
Yep.
It was quite a good showing, I feel like. And, I know we talked about this with Aiden. GWS, they weren't really out of it until, the final 3 minutes of the game, probably.
Yeah.
And it was a close matchup, but then again, Sydney just ended up having an answer for it straight from the start.
was a game that GWS just did not need to drop, and they dropped
Yeah.
it. And I said this on last week's pod that I think that Sydney should have bounced back, and they bounced back, which was good.
Yeah.
But it's another loss to Giants that, looking back from the start of the year, which I said that after Collingwood got absolutely belted by the Giants, that the Giants should be one of the premiership favourites. They're just dropping games that they shouldn't be dropping.
Yeah.
And you had a fair few players. They still performed. Like Tom Green, 34 disposals, 1 goal, 6 clearances. Finn Callaghan, 33 disposals, 6 clearances. Lockie Ash, 29 disposals, and Lockie Whitfield, 28 disposals. So like they're definitely getting a lot of the ball. It's just what they're doing with that disposal.
Yep.
And if we break down the stats, like so Sydney had the equal amount of inside 50s for the whole game in both teams, but Giants had over 50 more disposals, which it's just interesting because like in a game where you have more disposals and you have 54 inside 50s and the free kick count goes 27-9 your way, you really probably should be winning that game.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you look at all those stats for the whole game, it was pretty well close for the most of the game. But in saying that, Giants did not lead for any part of the game. Like, there was not one part of the day the Giants took a lead.
Yeah, well. Now, when do you reckon the last time that actually happened for GWS?
In terms of?
When they did not have one single lead, even if it was a lead for 5 seconds by a point.
Yeah, I would have to do some digging and research.
No, that would have been, I reckon it would have been quite a while ago. But yeah, I think we've broken that one down quite well. And, Sydney, it wasn't too bad in a way. Like, at the end of the first quarter, it was 34-13. Second quarter, GWS kind of came back quite a bit. Was only a goal of difference. And then they only ended up scoring 1 goal free. Sydney always had an answer for GWS that game.
Exactly right. Moving on, we go to the Hawthorn-Richmond game. Hawthorn getting up 16-13, 109. Richmond 6-8, 44. Hawthorn had their 100th year anniversary of the football club, so kudos to them for the amount of history that they've had as a football club. I'm sure a close friend of ours, Pat, would be happy about her Hawks doing super well, who has a John Newcomb bobblehead at the back of the studio floating around.
It's somewhere over there.
It's somewhere over
not
there.
actually John Newcomb, but just a little bobblehead.
But
he may make an appearance next week.
he may. But
Actually,
solid.
I might see if I can get him in.
Okay.
Continue talking.
So yeah, it was one of those games that Hawks ended up doing pretty well against Richmond. And a lot of players stood up for Hawthorn. Nick Watson, 3 goals. Jack Gunston, 3 goals. Congratulations, Jack, on your 500th goal. Massimo D'Ambrosio, 2 goals. Marby O'Chell, 2 goals. And Joshy Weddle, 1 goal, 20 disposals. Had a pretty solid game as well.
Yeah.
So
I ended up finding Jai.
you found
It's
John Newcomb.
up in the top right corner for anyone watching on YouTube.
But solid game from Hawthorn. They just had to do what they had to do, and they got the win. There's not a whole lot to talk about. But Josh Battle, he's racking up disposals. 33 disposals from him. CJ, 32 disposals, and Massimo D'Ambrosio absolutely tearing it up on the wing.
Yep.
And almost 800 metres gained. So he's definitely getting lots of metres gained. And your man, John Newcomb, who we've put on the right-hand side.
Maybe we could try and see if we can turn him from a bobblehead into an actual guest in the future.
Well, it's all about power of asking, and yeah, who knows? And James Sicily, 24 disposals. So there's not a whole lot to talk about in this game. Hawthorn just getting up when they need to. Next game, the Q Clash, the highly anticipated Q Clash. It was second versus third. Brisbane getting up 9-12-66. Gold Coast 7-7.
Trophy
Yes.
up for grabs.
So the Marcus Ashcroft medal, obviously.
Medal, what's it?
went to his son. So it's sort of like if Peter Dacos had a medal and it's just going to Nick or Josh every single year.
Yeah.
But I think Peter deserves a medal for everything he's done. So
Yeah, all right. Anyway, let's keep it to the Q Clash here. The 28th Q Clash it was Brisbane getting up 9-12-66 to Gold Coast Suns 7-7-49 up in Brisbane at the Gabba. It was a good showing, I feel like. I mean, you had the dynamic duo of the forward line for Brisbane in Charlie Cameron and Callum Archie kicking 3 goals each, both also having 2 behinds.
how good is it hearing Country Road back on the...
It's amazing. And then, yeah, like, you know, as you said, Ashcroft ended up getting the Ashcroft medal from his dad. 34 disposals, 9 clearances, 3 tackles. You know, he played an amazing game. Hugh McCluggage, 30 disposals, 8 clearances. And then Tuke Miller for Gold Coast having 29 disposals, 1 goal, 5 clearances, 5 tackles. Like, everyone had their part. Everyone played the way they're meant to play.
Yep.
And it just ended up going Brisbane's way. They just had all of the answers when you think about it.
Exactly right.
Didn't really kick straight
Yeah.
as what everyone probably were hoping for. 9 goals, 12 behinds. But, you know, they ended up getting the win in the Q Clash for the 28th edition.
Yeah. Well, so if we go to the...
Current ladder, let's have a look here. You have in first, you have Brisbane, followed by Collingwood, Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Western Bulldogs, Geelong and GWS in the top 8. You then have Fremantle, St Kilda, Essendon, Port Adelaide, Carlton, Sydney, Melbourne, Richmond, North Melbourne and West Coast, who is still yet to get a win.
If we push our predictions to round 9, which begin tonight, Fremantle take on Collingwood. Big game tonight. I expect this. This to be a good showing. What do I do?
Well, what's happening here?
Let's go back.
There we go.
I expect this to be a pretty good game, even though like it's Collingwood have dropped 4 in Maynard, Myercheck, DeGoey and Pendlebury. For various reasons, it says managed, but they're probably half of them are injured. Pendlebury, I understand, is like 50 years old. So I expect Collingwood to get up by about 15.
All right.
What do you think, Pat?
I am saying Collingwood will date the win, and so does Aiden. I got both mine and Aiden's tips up here.
St Kilda take on Carlton on the Friday night at the MCG. Spuds match.
Yep.
Should be a pretty big crowd for St Kilda, being the annual Spud game. Who have you got?
I've got Carlton going here. Hopefully, in saying that, they can actually bounce back from the performance they had the other day, and will hopefully get the win.
I think. Because of my wildcard tips, and so I got 8 out of 9 last week. I only got Collingwood wrong. Carlton do play well at the MCG, but I'm going to go for the Saints.
All right.
For an outlier.
Before we continue,
Yep.
I actually want to mention this.
Yep.
Collingwood actually has a couple of outstanding players that are out tomorrow night.
I've touched on that.
Oh, have you? Oh.
Yeah.
I was getting up the tip, so I didn't hear you say it. That, yeah, it's going to be quite interesting with how Collingwood go tonight with those emissions.
It will be.
Melbourne Hawthorn.
Hawthorn should get up. They should.
So you're going at Hawthorn?
But it's just one of those games that Melbourne could easily just win, and it would just be like, what happened there?
Right.
But Hawthorn should win.
All right. Me and Aiden both have Hawthorn as well. Essendon versus Sydney.
Sydney.
Yep.
But, yeah, I think Sydney should win. But it's at Marvel, so it could go either way, but I'm backing Sydney.
All right. Gold Coast versus Bulldogs. Oh, well, going on with that, both me and Aiden actually have Sydney going.
Okay.
Gold Coast Bulldogs.
It's in Darwin. Gold Coast play very well in Darwin, but then you've got Marcus Bontempelli back from injury. I'm going to go Gold Coast, just purely their record.
Yep.
You?
Aiden has Gold Coast and I got Bulldogs.
Okay.
Yep. So right now I've got all the away teams. Port Adelaide versus Adelaide.
This is going to be big.
The Battle of SA.
Well, the showdown.
SA, not an actual essay, like what we have to do. But yeah.
Yeah. Battle of the 1,500 words.
Yes.
I'm going on Crom on form. So,
Alright.
But it is a Port Adelaide home game with Port Adelaide home fans. But I think Adelaide, the way that they've been playing,
I feel like Adelaide's a better team right now against Port Adelaide, or when you compare them both.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going Adelaide as well as Aiden.
Yep.
Alrighty, Richmond and West Coast, the bottom of the bottom, the battle of the bottom two.
Well, not quite the bottom, but you know.
Both of them are at the bottom, aren't they?
Yeah. But, 16th versus 18th.
Bottom four.
This is going to be...
Could West Coast get their first win of the year?
They could. Let's do a prediction. How much do you reckon are going to show up to the MCG for a game like this?
Oh. Well, I mean, in saying this, on the radio the other day, I heard on the day of
It's sold out.
no, on the day of Hawthorn's celebration, they would say, "Oh, you know, big crowd, 85,000 are going to pack the MCG for Hawthorn taking on Richmond." This person obviously did not know anything about football, because he also said two very good teams.
Yeah. Well, they've got...
Two very good teams 10 years ago, mate. If this was 10 years ago and the 90th anniversary, you probably would have got about 85,000. But you got Richmond that are in the bottom four, and you got Hawthorn that are doing quite well. So
Yeah.
Anyway, in saying that, I'm going to go 35,000. Because Richmond fans do show up.
I'm going to say 25.
Richmond fans show up at the MCG. If this was at Marvel, I would say 20.
Well, Dimmer's got a curse on that ground.
Yeah.
I hate company.
Well, he's no longer the coach of Richmond.
That's valid.
But I'm saying 35,000 people for Richmond and West Coast, and I am saying that Richmond will get the win. Aiden is saying West Coast will get the win.
And he's a Richmond supporter.
Yes. You are?
Richmond.
Richmond? Alrighty.
GMHBA Stadium take with the Geelong Giants game. 7th versus 8th. Should be a pretty good
Had they
game.
turned it back into a football ground?
GMHBA.
It was turned into an NFL ground. It was for a movie that's being filmed down in Geelong.
Yeah, right. Wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the actual topic.
Oh, this is tough.
Both Aiden and I have Geelong.
Yeah. Geelong should win because it's in Geelong.
I feel like if GWS want to win and want to stay for a fighting chance at the end of the round, they need to turn their season around or turn their games around right now. Because if they continue playing the way they have over the last few weeks, they're going to go downhill quite fast.
You're exactly right. So I've got Geelong. North Melbourne versus Lions. So it's almost 1v18, but it's 1v17. I'm backing North Melbourne. No, sorry.
Wow.
No. It's in Hobart, though.
True.
But you expect Brisbane to win.
You would think so. All right, we all got Brisbane for that.
So
Moving...
just a quick rundown. So I've got Collingwood, St Kilda, Hawthorn, Sydney, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Richmond, Geelong, and Brisbane.
Aiden has Collingwood, Carlton, Hawthorn, Sydney, Gold Coast, Adelaide, West Coast, Geelong, and Brisbane. And I have Collingwood, Carlton, Hawthorn, Sydney, Bulldogs, Adelaide, Richmond, Geelong, Brisbane.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay, that is our
Moving
AFL
on
segment done. We've only
to
got a few
the
minutes
other
left.
sports. Oh, we don't really have a time limit.
We don't. That's true. That's a valid point. Miami Grand Prix. You want to talk about your big man?
Very, very good showing by McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
They had the sprint race where Kimi Antonelli, the new rookie for Mercedes, who overtook Lewis Hamilton, ended up getting pole for the sprint, but didn't really go his way. Oscar Piastri ended up finishing second, followed by Lando Norris, his teammate, finishing first in the sprint. However, in the actual race, it was the opposite. Oscar Piastri got his 4th win of the season and 3rd in a row, getting the 25 points, followed by Lando Norris, who finished second. George Russell for Mercedes took that final spot on the podium at 3rd, followed by Max Verstappen, who finished on pole and started the race on pole. Alex Albon in at 5th, and Kimi Antonelli at 6th, followed by Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, both for Ferrari at 7 and 8. Carlos Sainz for Williams at 9, and Yuki Tsunoda at Red Bull at 10th. They're all the players or races that ended up getting the points. If you go to the current drivers' standings, you have Oscar Piastri claiming a 16-point lead against his teammate Lando Norris, followed by Max Verstappen at 99 points for Red Bull. In terms of the team standings, you have McLaren that is winning by about 104 points, 105 points over Mercedes, followed by Red Bull. In other news, though, in F1, sad to see this as an Australian, but Alpine has decided to replace Jack Doohan, son of legendary motorbike rider Mick Doohan. He's going to be replaced by Franco Colapinto for the next 5 races, as the team has decided to rotate the seats, which is quite unusual. So by the sounds of it, you'll have Colapinto that will race the next 5, and then Jack Doohan that will come back. Then Colapinto, then Jack.
Okay.
That's a little bit unusual, but that's the way Alpine has decided to play it for the rest of the year. So We'll see how that goes. In basketball news, a lot is happening, a lot to unpack since our last episode. I said the Lakers were going to win their Game 5
that
match.
didn't end well.
Did not end well for LeBron and Luka in LA. They ended up getting eliminated by the Minnesota Timberwolves. But in terms of this actual round, let's see how this plays out. So in the West, you have Oklahoma taking on Denver Nuggets.
Yep.
You have the Minnesota Timberwolves taking on the Golden State Warriors. That's actually quite interesting when you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have 6th versus 7th seed. Quite unusual to see both the 2nd and 3rd seed in a conference going out in the first round. Over in the East, you have the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Indiana Pacers, and the New York Knicks taking on the reigning champion Boston Celtics. Both the Cavs and the Celtics currently down 2-0 to their respective opponents.
Yep.
Golden State holds a 1-game lead against Minnesota, and Oklahoma has evened up the series 1 game apiece against Denver. To kind of wrap up the episode, a lot of basketball news, or a lot has happened in Australian basketball.
Yep.
Started off with the week with down in Frankston, good old Frankston Recreation Centre, where Australian NBA superstar Josh Giddey just decided to pull up and play a casual game of basketball.
Imagine that, just showing up and you're like, okay, boys, we've got a good chance of winning today. And next minute, you see Josh Giddey just walk in and just showing his class.
Well, I heard on the radio yesterday, they were talking to the coach of that team.
Yep.
And they were saying how one of their players ended up giving them a call, saying, I got a mate that is interested in filling in for us. And she's like, we don't really have fill-ins. We normally just play, the 6 players.
Yep.
He's like, all right, that's fine. And then one of their teammates called up and said, I'm not going to make it. I'm sick.
Yep.
She rang up the friend who rang up
The friend.
initially. And he said, all right, if your mate wants to come down, he can. We've got so-and-so that's pulled out. And he's like, all right, sweet. His name's Josh. No idea that it was going to be Josh Giddey, but Josh Giddey ended up showing up, ended up dropping 20 points. But it wasn't him that kind of had the highlight of the night. It was this guy that plays for Frankston Blues in the NBL 1 who ended up dropping 50 points in that game.
Yeah, right.
Against Josh Giddey. So it wasn't a teammate of Josh, just an opponent.
Yeah.
Ended up dropping 50 points against Josh Giddey, which quite casual as you do. But
How much have you dropped in a game of basketball?
Well, we won't get into that. I'm not the greatest basketballer.
We should ask Aiden.
What, how much I've dropped or how much he's dropped
How
in a
much
game?
have you dropped in a game?
Aiden probably wouldn't even know how much I've dropped. It's not 50 points, I will say that. But in other NBL 1 news, Melbourne Tigers, son of Melbourne Tigers champion, Jack Purchase broke the record for the most games in an NBL 1 game at 55 points.
Yeah, right, wow.
So good on him. But last night, we had the Trans-Tasman exhibition games, Australia versus New Zealand. You have 3 games. Let's see if I can get them up whereabouts they are. You had 1 game last night in Adelaide. You then have on Friday night, where is that? That is played at Uni SC Arena.
Yep.
I would not really have a clue where that is. They're playing 3 games, though, against New Zealand. The Opals and the Boomers are. Last night, both the Boomers and the Opals ended up getting the win. You had the Australian Opals getting up against New Zealand 88-70, where you had quite a good showing by a few players, a few debutants that were making their national team debut. And then you also had the Boomers with them grabbing a 80-68 win over New Zealand.
Yep.
Good showing though. Again, these don't really mean anything. They're just a bunch of exhibition games. But it's good to see some basketball being played back in Australia. Australian Boomers back. You had Dyson Daniels and Josh Giddey that were there. Dyson Daniels also getting the most improved in the NBA, so good on him for that. But I think that's it, Ben. So thank you for watching, everyone. This has been another episode of the Winning Edge Sports Podcast. I've been Pat, this has been Ben. And you can check us out on YouTube and Spotify for these episodes, as well as Facebook and Instagram at the Winning Edge Sports Podcast on our social media. Ben, it's been a good time.
It has been a good time. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us for another week. See ya.
Cheers.